I'd be really delighted to now invite our panel up, which includes Lisa Cameron MP, Leigh-Anne Moore from CryptoUK, Sean Kiernan from Greengage, and Craig Kennedy from Nortal, and our very own Jess Insall from Steedman Accountants. We will be taking some audience questions, but I had a few questions that I'd kind of thought that might be relevant to our conversation today. And the first one is for Leigh-Anne. Leigh-Anne, we were obviously talking about world of business and kind of how it is that we are kind of looking forward to the world of business for cryptocurrency, for Web3. And so what do you think the key attributes and skills for the next generation should be to develop through the Web3 driven job market?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you for my first trip to Glasgow, which has been good.
We're very glad we put the weather on for you.
I appreciate that. I was listening to the presentations earlier, and a lot of what was said really sort of resonated with me. And I think it's really challenging. We talk about the technical skills that are needed, and obviously digital literacy is a prerequisite within this space. But it's also all of those other skills that you want to be sort of cultivating. So, for example, this is an industry, this is a space that moves very, very quickly. So being able to quickly, get up to speed with new technologies, new applications, and be able to apply that technology is really, really important. So being adaptable, being open-minded, really sort of embracing change is something that I certainly think is a skill set that we should see a lot of going forward.
Thank you. Does anybody else on the panel have anything else to add to that?
I think we should be much more broadly making sure that this is in the curriculum, that children, no matter where they're going to school, no matter their background, have opportunities. I know from some of the research I've done that many of the private schools have coding as an integral part of much of the work. I want to see it something that, encompasses everybody, and there's an inclusion aspect to it, because I think only when we harness everybody's potential in the UK can we really make the most of the skills and talent we have. So I'm going to be doing, as I mentioned in my talk, my next debate in the Parliament is about digital skills and innovation and careers of the future, and it's very much aimed at the Education Secretary of State, because I think we need to look at how this all links together to make sure that people have these opportunities. And it's difficult sometimes when you come from, say, my generation to think about what those might be. But there is some good research out there that suggests that, the coding and those elements, and when you get those basic sort of fundamental skills, they're transferable to new technological drives moving forward. So I think we need to make sure that we are putting those things in place. We're not even very good at financial education in schools just now, I wouldn't say. I did ask a question about that in the Parliament and about what happens regarding financial education in primary, and I was told, well, people do arithmetic, but that's not really what I was interested in getting. There's a lot of people who, as soon as they come out of university, have massive debts now. And they feel that they're lumbered with that for, decades past graduation. So I think we need to make sure that financial education, literacy, digital literacy, all of those aspects, which are core to everything we're going to be doing now and in the future, are embedded in our curriculum. So that's one of the key things I want to take forward.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with that. And I think it's something, a really interesting statistic that I saw is that even in financial services, if people have parents that work in the financial services, 40% of them would consider a career in financial services. Whereas people who don't have parents that are maybe bankers or in the financial services, only 9% would even consider a career in financial services. And obviously financial services is the second biggest contributor to Scotland's GDP. It's a huge industry, and there's so many well-paying, innovative, meaningful jobs that I think actually, in a way, as a sector, we also just need to promote ourselves, because there's a lot of kind of concern, and again, studies have shown that Gen Z are kind of the most, or the least optimistic about life in general. McKinsey did some great work on kind of it was in the US, but on the kind of Gen Z mental health crisis. And actually, things like financial inclusion, which Web3 is a huge part of, is a really important part of solving that. And so I think actually getting young people and getting our next generation into good jobs in finance solves a lot more problems than just getting us better employees. Which is obviously great for businesses, because our bottom line will be better if we have a more engaged and skilled workforce. But I think it also solves a lot of wider social issues.
Thank you, Jess. As an employer, Sean, how do you think individuals can stay updated with evolving technologies?
I mean, it's something that I've had to find in my own career. I mean, I cut my teeth in insurance. I was working in internal consulting. I didn't have any exposure to banking. My parents were both in education, so I was one of those 9%. And coming from a completely outside space and coming in, there's this whole world that first you have to get your head around, and then two, when you figure out what one bit of it is, the rest of it is something else that, like, until you actually live and breathe it, it's still foreign. It's academic. When I went into banking, there was this whole kind of lingo that I had to pick up. This is before crypto even existed. And then the thing that really got me fired up was building this bank for the first time, because so rarely, and I think a lot of people get into silos very quickly when they start a job. Do you see the whole of an organism? And when you're setting something up from scratch, you have to get your head around all the different pieces. And in doing so, your brain kind of changes. It's like when you write a PhD. When you go down that path of just deep diving into something, you have to have an analytical rigor that when you flip the brain into thinking about things in a certain way, you always will take that with you when approaching a new topic. And it's very difficult, I think, for the youth to have that until they've gone through the pain of actually having at the coalface to deliver something that lives and breathes. And I think entrepreneurialism is something that I would really advocate for anyone. I can't say I'm necessarily a success story, but I think just doing it and making failures and trying, when you're at that necessity of having to execute something, the way the brain kind of has to adapt to delivering something means you will face new things and life kind of throws stuff at you. But crypto for me was just, okay, here's a new thing. Let's take it on, and that's been the more exciting thing for me.
And does anybody else on the panel have anything else to kind of add to that at all?
Yeah, my mind is taken back to an event I spoke at where someone said, "Oh, you're a lawyer. What do you know about cybersecurity?" Good question, I asked. But I mean, the thing that really surprised me pre-GDPR was people just didn't see the connection between law and cybersecurity, or really any form of tech. Whereas they seem to view it as, well, there's going to be a tech problem within the business, but they didn't really have the foresight to see, well, this is going to present you with, business continuity problems if the business can't operate. Very big businesses have been back to pencil and paper before, and in the hotel space, if you don't know who's there, who's coming, who's going, you can see the practical difficulties. Similarly, with supply chain threat, we all know about that. If you have a cyber crisis, it'll impact your supply chain, and in sectors like energy, there's very significant financial penalties for failure to deliver. And there's regulatory issues as well. Now, of course, they are front and centre post-GDPR. There's regulatory sanctions coming down the track in terms of the digital and operational resilience legislation that's coming in the financial services sector. So, to come back to the blended skill sets that I think we're all talking about, I don't think the silos that have previously existed in modern commercial life will continue to exist. You know, I think there's a much greater appreciation now across the board about how cyber disruption and Web3 and business online generally impacts the entire business ecosystem. And certainly from a legal sort of regulatory perspective, the laws are now mandating that there's some form of business resilience. It's no longer good enough to kind of turn your pockets out and say, oh, well, you know, we've been hacked. You know, it's sad, but what can we do? Businesses are expected to do better, and at the point the regulators started to become involved post GDPR, they were very clear that businesses that didn't have adequate resilience would get what's coming to them in terms of regulatory sanctions. So I do think, as you say, businesses have to grapple new and evolving problems with the advancement of digital and the digital age. But you know, I think it's something that businesses are slowly starting to get their arms around.
Thanks, Craig.
I'd just like to add something to that. So I've worked in financial services my whole working career, and you know, now I spend pretty much all my time working in the crypto space, have done for quite a few years now. And I work with very large exchanges, and I work with very small crypto firms who might only have sort of 3 or 4 people. And what I notice in terms of a contrast is that in the crypto digital asset space, there's far more opportunities to really try to be innovative and find innovative solutions to some of the problems out there. So it's a far more sort of collaborative environment, and I think there's a lot of lessons that could be learnt there for firms who are looking at how they can, you know, start to really sort of cultivate that innovation and digital mindset within their firms. I think the first stage is to start sort of, you know, being open and collaborative and starting to create these environments where people can learn and make mistakes and, you know, that type of thing. So I think that's a big challenge for firms.
Leigh-Anne, I suppose the next question for you is, we obviously often talk about decentralisation, and I suppose how can we ensure that education and job opportunities in this space are accessible to all, regardless of their background?
Yeah, I think this is another area that's changing a lot, and I think through the collaborative nature of crypto and blockchain initiatives, you know, you're starting to see things like sort of boot camps and people giving the opportunity to learn new skills like coding, regardless of their background. So I think there is, you know, starting to sort of open up a lot more opportunities for people, and there's various sort of apprenticeships that are now going on, and you know, lots of really great initiatives that are happening across the board. So people are getting more opportunities, and it's just becoming more accessible.
And what do you think the opportunities, or the biggest opportunities, are in the crypto sector at the moment, and also what are the challenges?
Oh wow! So the biggest opportunities in the crypto sector, I think, I mean, whether you sort of buy into Bitcoin or not, I'm an absolute firm believer that blockchain technology is transformational across every industry. So I think it's really important to differentiate between the sort of volatility trading side of Bitcoin, which a lot of people focus on, and the actual benefits of blockchain technology. And certainly, you know, I've spent the last couple of weeks myself talking about the impact that it has in cross-border payments. So I completely, you know, relate to what you were saying earlier. It's, you know, there's huge opportunities across the board. So I think it's about, you know, looking at what that means for your particular industry.
And does anybody else on the panel have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, from a financial crime investigation perspective, I think blockchain really should be transformative. Excuse me. One of the starting points that I sometimes used to take with my financial crime background was the Great Train Robbery in the 60s. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, a gang of robbers managed to pull interfere with train signals, brought a train to a halt and raided sacks full of cash from the train down an embankment into the boot of a car, and off they went. Now, what chance did the police have of finding literally sacks of cash? And they were, using the maximum speed of cars that were available at that time and the hours that had lapsed since the robbery to try to work out where these sacks of cash might be. Now, compare that with the blockchain, where every single transaction is there in glorious Technicolor, and it gives you, to some degree, the ability to transfer a £10 note from Mint and trace through everyone's hands that's ever been. I think the challenge is that the laws, and particularly the international cross-border laws, are still catching up. And in a sense, that you've gone from having too little information at the outset of financial crime, where you need to get a court order to get a bank to give you the names of the various accounts through which payments have been made, to a blockchain where it's all there, but there's so much of it. How do you possibly get your arms around it, and how do you try to decipher everything that's there? So the big opportunity that I see with the decentralized nature of blockchain, etc., is financial crime investigation should be very much easier. It's just a case of the infrastructure catching up with the technology.
Thank you.
I think there's another aspect of that as well, which is a bit of a challenge, which is the privacy aspect for people as well, in terms of how they spend money, how they engage in society. And I think in the Parliament in particular, organisations like Big Brother Watch, etc., have been watching very closely and engaging with the central bank digital currency developments that we have, and sort of raising issues about consumer privacy, etc., in terms of how much information should people be able to access about transactions, and where do we draw the balance between making sure that there's security and that we're tackling crime, but at the same time that people's freedom and privacy is not infringed as well at the same time. So yeah, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, and I think coming back to the kind of accessibility and diversity point with jobs, I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges for the sector at the moment. If you look across the tech sector as a whole, but especially the crypto sector, is very, very male-dominated. And that's something I've found a lot in my work. And there's a lot of kind of associations with the culture of crypto online. A lot of the kind of either Bitcoin fundamentalists or kind of crypto bros, as they get called, are into some really, really wacky politics. So there's everything from people advocating for people going to raw meat diets and raw milk diets, leaving cities, going to live on a farm. Your wife shouldn't have a job, she should just be at home barefoot and pregnant. And it's this very kind of strange online culture that can sometimes be associated with crypto. So I think it's really important that as a sector we acknowledge that there actually, unfortunately, still is this issue that we have with diversity. And even though it might just be some kind of subcultures within the industry, it does bleed out, I think. And I think we do see a lot of issues with, a very male-dominated culture, and a culture where we don't necessarily have the diversity that we should have. And if we're saying this technology and this industry is going to be what builds the system of the future, we can't just replace the system of the future with the same system that we had last time, but with extra tech. We actually need a real diverse and real new start to the system where decentralization and equality actually means equality. So I think it's a really interesting point where actually banks and financial services, a lot of the kind of traditional finance, have done a huge amount of work on diversity. I think a lot of old tech is actually, or a lot of old finance is a lot more diverse than tech nowadays, and they do a lot on ESG, they do a lot on kind of social governance stuff. So I think actually, as a sector, we need to be really aware that if we want to compete with old finance, then we need to be as diverse or more diverse, and we need to be as focused on environmentalism and governance and social ethics, because ultimately that's a society that people want to live in, and we can't just return to the old ways of the boys doing the banking.
Yay, Jess.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please do.
Because I was really interested to hear what you're saying, and as a woman who's worked in crypto for many years now, I must say that there is a sort of thriving female community in crypto, and certainly, you know, you have a lot of organisations that really promote females within this space. So I think, and I've got a TradFi background, so I'm seeing far more collaboration on the crypto side than I ever saw in traditional finance.
Which is a fantastic move forward, I think, for everyone. Sean, if you don't mind me asking, how do you think Web3 can help create a more inclusive financial system?
So I think we've, maybe just following on, and I'll kind of address that as well. I think we've foregrounded the tech in a way, that we've created this lexicon of, I mean, it's created a world that is very inward focused. And the bit about Web3 that I find so exciting is the tech is there. I mean, and I would say it's already here. If we wanted to build stuff on top of digital asset backend or digitized backends, it's more about how do we come together and create the standards, which is why the work in Parliament is so important, that these things are done with proper governance and kind of fair metrics to come in and operate on a standard and level playing field. But once those metrics are in place, to give you an example, everyone that opens up an account goes through compliance. And we are all bearing that kind of pain as individuals. And also the firms are bearing the cost of that. And if we were to form some standard with a financial passport, provided it's voluntary and people allow their data to be shared, we then can have a commonly accessible database that we can all then open up products to somebody that is then able to access things not just from a single firm, and this is the dream of open finance, but across multiple firms. So the technology, I think we've created this kind of high bar to entry, which might be male-dominated or run by people that are fluent in this kind of interior world. But as soon as we can break that open and say, okay, here's something that actually works and saves cost and provides solutions, you immediately enfranchise a whole suite of people to then say, okay, I have a financial passport, I can access these things, it's in my gift to choose what I wish. And then you create an ecosystem of people that can sell into that. And that's a much broader world than just a handful of people. And I think the banks have done a lot of work, but these are still kind of institutions that have a vested interest to create a ring-fenced ecosystem. And ultimately, I mean, I'm a firm, I appreciate that there is an incentive to do that. But when you can shift the balance of power to the consumer, I think you get a better outcome also for the firms serving that central actor. It's slightly a complicated way to answer your question. So.
Would anybody else like to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think, you know, there's the opportunity. There's so many people, and when I first sort of reached into this sector, I didn't realise how many who don't actually have access to banking in the UK, and this new sector has the potential to bring people in and give them access to financial inclusion, I think, where they haven't had that before. And obviously the correct sort of regimes and controls need to be round about that. But I think the mixture of the tech, the interest, the dynamism of it, and also the fact that people, you know, do really need, if you're not financially included, then you're at a huge disadvantage in our society. So we need to have much more inclusion in that sense. And things are moving from cash. So many people who don't have bank accounts would have relied on post offices and cash. And we're doing a huge piece in the Parliament to try and make sure that there's still access to that. But, you know, looking to the future, we have to find other ways to promote financial inclusion. And I think that this sector is one of those. And I'm always mindful of when we had the Deputy Digital Minister from Ukraine come to the Parliament to speak about how cryptocurrency had been able to get finance to people on the front line of a conflict zone when traditional banking had actually failed. and why they want Ukraine, when it comes out the other end of the conflict, to be at the helm of digital finance and cryptocurrency moving forward as well, because they've actually seen firsthand what a difference it can make. So I think there's a huge amount of potential, and we just need to make sure that we have the correct parameters around about that to make it safe and secure for people, so that the good can come of it, in making people more financially included, but also reaching those areas of the world who are in dire straits, where perhaps traditional finance is not able to continue to to service people in those situations, whereas other forms of finance can. So there's great potential. We just need to make sure we operate it in the right way and work for the positive, because there are always bad actors as well as good in the world. And obviously there's been a huge amount of concern about perhaps Russia using cryptocurrency, etc. as well. So there's always the double-edged sword, isn't there? But I think we can harness the positives too.
I was just going to add to what you were saying there, and it always surprises me when you hear the statistic that 30% globally of adults do not have access to financial services or are outside of the the banking system, which is a huge percentage globally. So certainly financial inclusion is one of the main benefits, but also, I think if we look at the financial, from a financial products perspective, historically, women don't tend to trade or invest as much as men do, and sort of leading on from what you were saying earlier. And this is an area where that has also sort of opened up huge amounts of potential for women to sort of get involved in that space and invest more without it seeming so sort of scary. So I think it's opening up a lot of channels around financial inclusion for many sectors.
I think at this point we'd maybe see if anybody else has any questions. Yep.
Leigh-Anne, you mentioned the potential for this tech to be kind of transformational across loads of different industries. How do we educate your average business owner of an SME as to what those benefits are? Because someone who speaks to SMEs every day, that seems like a long way away from kind of where we are just now.
Yeah, I think it does. I think when we look at blockchain technology, there's so many emerging use cases across the board, and I think the more good examples we see, the more it starts to get people engaged in the right conversations. But certainly, from smart contracts all the way through to payments and just anywhere where there's sort of inefficiencies within the system can be eased with blockchain technology.
Would anybody else like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think when blockchain technology is working, people won't know they're using it necessarily. And so it's not necessarily telling people that, oh, you're using crypto now. It's actually just that this technology will become so integrated in a lot of kind of normal back-end, in the same way that most people don't know the HTML of the software they're using. Most people have no idea what the little bits inside their phone do. Realistically, when people are using blockchain technology or are using digital assets, they won't necessarily know all about the digital assets. And so I think it is a long way away, but I think that the time when people will start using it is like sneaking vegetables into your kids' food. It will just happen whether they know it or not, and it's probably good for them. And it might take a little while to convince them that it's good for them, but actually once it's working, it will work. And I don't think it will necessarily be a disruptive thing day to day.
I think the user interface, I would agree completely, is kind of the bit that's missing. So Web2 is so successful because it's easy. If you can open up a Facebook account and get some stuff, like, and an SME particularly is like, there's so many things that come on every day. You need to make the bills kind of meet. You need to run your business. Like, the last thing you're going to think about is blockchain. And that is the last thing you should think about unless you're in the space directly. And our job as an industry is to say, okay, there's a lot of pain points that you have, and I think where the friction happens in the traditional world is where we can address some of these things with the new technologies, and that's with the draw. So we need to create some way of saying, how do we add value to what you do as a business that isn't what you're getting from the traditional players, and then you can win at least that door opening moment and say, okay, here's a whole other world for you. And we're finding that the professional advisors are actually one of the best places to open up those doors because there's trust. So if you have a trusted relationship with an accountant or a solicitor, financial advisor, and you're asking them a question about how do I kind of run this, or it is a very complicated nut to crack. And once you have that dialogue already in place, you can say, okay, by the way, maybe there is another way for you to do this that you don't have as much pain. So we're not there yet. I completely agree. It's years away, actually, before we really transform the plumbing of how people access money. And I mean, I'm most interested in the financialization piece of digital assets. And there's a whole other world that we haven't talked about, gaming and et cetera. But maybe that's for another panel.
I think just to add to that as well, which it's really interesting that I was asked just totally separately to this type of work, but from my background as a psychologist, to open a new type of therapy which is being trialled in 3 different universities in the UK, in Glasgow, and I think one in Manchester, one in London, called avatar therapy, and it's a mental health therapy, and the patient creates their own avatar. So if they have anxiety or anxious thoughts, the avatar will give the anxious thoughts. If they hear voices, the avatar will be the vehicle for the voices, and then the therapist helps them to challenge these negative thoughts, anxious thoughts, disturbing thoughts, and gain coping strategies. And actually the first trial that's come out of that has shown that it's as effective, if not more effective, with less sessions than traditional therapy on its own. So I think, there's just huge scope with AI, with Web3 to develop healthcare, to develop training for medics, to develop so many more things to make sure that we can capitalise on the technological advancements, give people real in vivo experiences as well. I know that they're doing some training with paramedics, looking at different scenarios and situations on a sort of AI basis, because you don't want people to train on a person and get it wrong, do you? So you want to kind of, do these things in scenarios. And so there's so much kind of scope to streamline a lot of the work that we already do in other roles and jobs as well, that I think it's going to have massive impact. It's not just an industrial revolution, it's going to be arts, culture, sports, you name it. I think there's going to be changes, and this digital transformation is going to be at the heart of it. So I just want to make sure that it's capitalised here as much as possible in Scotland and in the rest of the UK.
Do we have any other questions from our audience? Ronan.
Earlier, and I'm working at Crypto University in Scotland, and my university has with crypto skills development and education was like most of it was just one paragraph in the textbook about Bitcoin and how it's evolved on this asset, and that was kind of it. So with the Crypto Club, we've had to actually go abroad to get accredited crypto courses for our members about blockchain, about different cryptocurrencies. So I was wondering, are there any organisations that are doing crypto education in Scotland, like accredited, that our members can take?
I don't know about Scotland, but I've certainly been involved in some post-grad programmes with UK universities, specifically in the blockchain space. CryptoUK as well, we're doing quite a lot of training, Crypto 101.
Yeah. And I've been out to Strathclyde Business School, so they're doing quite a lot of work there, trying to develop this I spoke to someone earlier who I think's gone now, unfortunately, but they were talking about some of the courses at Glasgow University that are just brand new coming on stream. And I've just been invited to go down to Oxford because they're doing a lot of work on blockchain development there. So obviously I think it's pretty new and niche, isn't it? But the more that you're doing to push it along, and the more that the different universities are all competing as well to some degree, are able to develop. I think universities and colleges, apprenticeships, all those types of things are going to be really vital, and those who are at the cusp of it are going to be the ones who thrive for the future. And I've already seen lots of interest from other countries about the education here in this sector. And so I think if we don't do it, others will. So we need to make sure that we develop those courses for people who live here, but also for international students who want to continue to come here to study and train and be part of our diverse workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add that we're all here doing crypto education right now, and actually education isn't always going to be a textbook or an accredited course. And when I work as a crypto accountant. I have absolutely no formal background whatsoever in crypto. I started work at 17 on an apprenticeship scheme as an auditor in very, very traditional finance, mostly on paper, with farms or with like scrap yards or some tech companies, but a whole mixture of everything. And actually, I think what's really important is the transferable skills. And actually, if you're going to be in a new industry and you're going to be interested in new things, there probably aren't going to be textbooks on them, because the standard of writing for a textbook is you have to have done the studies, you then have had to have someone check the studies, you then have to have a publisher to say, okay, we've got these checked studies, let's write them into a textbook. And then it takes a couple of years to print it and distribute it, and then the lecturers need to learn about it. And so naturally, universities are always going to be teaching the kind of bread and butter foundation skills. And so I think innovation is really important, and actually research is a really important thing that our universities can do. But the best thing that you can do in terms of education is just getting out there and learning it. And I think actually right now we're in the kind of golden age in the entire of human history for education, because you can go online and you can go on, MIT have a lot of, they upload pretty much all of their kind of lectures and courses, and you can go and learn about anything that you want. You can go find a podcast on it, you can go find a YouTube video on it. And so actually I think embracing those kind of more informal education opportunities is really important, and actually a lot of what employers will look for and a lot of what people in the crypto space will look for is that you've taken the initiative, and it's about the mentality and the mindset and the interest more than necessarily the accredited courses. So accredited courses are great, but I think it's also really important to get the kind of softer side of skills of actually just going out there and meeting people and doing all the really exciting things that exist out in the crypto ecosystem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's not just the universities that are behind, the courts and the laws are too. They just can't keep up with tech, and you know there's been lots of real sort of soul searching done about how to characterise cryptocurrencies, because it just doesn't neatly fit into any of the kind of traditional legal definitions of what property is. The courts are now over that, but it's taken several years and sort of one step at a time to try to get there. The way that they broached sort of financial crime issues with it initially was equity. Is it fair that it's urgent? Is it fair that this order, a freezing order or whatever is put on? Generally they got around it that way, but at the point they actually had to grapple with the definitions, it took them a long time. There was a joint task force set up to try to smooth out the wrinkles between generally accepted legal principle and the way that tech is going. I think just sort of jumping in at the deep end is sometimes the right way so far as these types of things go. What you said resonates. I mean, I've been speaking to clients about proactive cyber resilience probably for about 10 years now. I remember when I started doing it, nobody was really in that space. Nobody was talking about it, and it is quite an intimidating thing to go out and speak to very sophisticated businesses about that something that's new that is right, but nobody else is really doing. Sometimes there just isn't a blueprint. There's been 3 occasions in my career where I've had to, you know, sort of push things forward where there's no legal precedent, there's no law, and you just have to sort of feel your way through and say, well, the nearest thing we've got is this, and it's sensible that the law extends in that way. And, you know, generally, you know, it's either going to be right or wrong. Happily for me, it was always right. But, you know, that's just the nature of new things. Someone has to do it first, so I would encourage you to have the confidence to move on with it.
Thank you very much to our panel. I'd like to thank Lisa Cameron, MP, Craig Kennedy from Nortal, Sean Kiernan from Greengage, Leigh-Anne Moore from CryptoUK, and our very own Jess Insall for being on our panel this evening. Thank you much. If there is still going to be some time for networking, if you've got any more questions, then please do put them forward to people when you're kind of chatting this evening. Thank you very much.